Very briefly, I would like to say what we did, how did we do it, and what did we find out. What we did was to ask ourselves, what is the implications of the continental free trade area for the demand of transport infrastructure and services? So basically, what does this mean for roads, rail, airport, railways? What does this mean in terms of the number of trucks, train wagons, airplanes, and vessels, and so on? Now, how did we do it? Pretty technical work. We started by doing a trade model, the gravity model, to see bilateral trade flows between African countries. Once we knew that, we then went on to do transport model. What transport modes would be used to move the trade between the different origin and destination pairs that we identified from the trade model. Once we knew the transport modes that would be used, the quantity, we were then able to quantify the freight for roads, for rail, for air, for ship. And once we knew that, we could calculate the number of trucks, the number of rail wagons, the number of airplanes, the number of vessels. And once we knew that, and we know the unit cost of different trucks, aircraft, we could put numbers on what we are looking at. So what did we find out? For roads, and I can see some charts on the screen, which is very small. We look at the baseline of 2019. We look at the horizon of 2030, and we look at a number of scenarios. The first scenario is what happens if we implement the continental free trade area by 2030. What happens if we implement the continental free trade area plus regional infrastructure projects that we have on the continent? And we have some very interesting results. I think today, the road is the lion's share of freight on the continent, 77%. But if we do implement the continental free trade area, this will fall to about 69% or so. But the most interesting findings we are having is that the railway today carries just 0.3% of freight on the continent. If we implement the continental free trade area, this will move to 6.8%. And this has implications for investment in railways. What we found for air transport, for instance, is that today the share is about 1%. In 2030, that share will not change. But the most important statistics is that the volume carried by air would double from 2.5 million tons to 4.5 million tons. And what does that mean? We need a lot more aircraft to carry this increased goods by air. So basically, we also ask ourselves, what infrastructure needs upgrading? Because we find out that there are certain links that we see a substantial increase in flow of freight. And those links, we believe, will not be able to accommodate the increase in freight. And so they need upgrading. And for roads, we identify over 600,000 kilometers of roads that need upgrading. For railways, we identify more than 87,000 kilometers of railways that will need upgrading. And we can begin to put figures into this because we know that we need about $0.5 million to $1.5 million to upgrade a kilometer of road. And if we do that mathematics, we are able to say that we need between 25 to 60 billion dollars to upgrade our road. the increase in goods as a result of the continental free trade area. I don't know how much time I do have, but we also have a very good sense of where, in terms of sub-regions of the continent, we are seeing increased traffic, and this can also guide investment decisions. For instance, for roads, we see a lot of movements within West Africa. About 39% of the trucks that we will require would be operating within West Africa. We also see a lot of movements between West and Southern Africa. For railways, we see a lot of movement within West Africa. We see a lot of movement within Southern Africa and Northern Africa as well. And I just want to begin to jump into some policy recommendations here and way forward. What we have seen is that the African Continental Free Trade Area cannot be implemented in isolation. It has to be implemented hand in hand with regional infrastructure projects, like the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. I think the good thing is that we have 69 priority projects of the PIDA. We know that it will cost $160 billion to implement the PIDA projects, which is a huge opportunity for investors. Number two is the strategies, national strategies for the African Continental Free Trade Area. I think the point we want to make is the national strategies must take into consideration infrastructure development. The good news is that our study has taken a deep dive to all African countries. So we do know for each country on the continent how many kilometers of roads have to be upgraded, how many kilometers of railways have to be upgraded, how many trucks, how many airplanes, and so on, the countries need to be able to meet the requirements of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the ECA, we are there to support countries to mainstream infrastructure requirement into the African Continental Free Trade Area national strategy. And let me just end with these figures in terms of what we need. And I think the Executive Secretary mentioned some of them. In terms of the equipment requirement, we have calculated that we need about $340 billion to invest in trucks to carry the increase in freight on the continent. We need $25 billion to invest in aircraft. We need $36 billion to invest in freight wagon for train. And we need about $4 billion to invest in vessels. So I just want to leave it there with those numbers. And altogether, that's about $411 billion worth of investment that is waiting for people who want to tap. Thank you.